On this episode of WarDocs, we delve into the pervasive issue of imposter syndrome, specifically within the context of military medicine. Our host is WarDocs board member Major Lindsey Umlauf, an Army physical therapist, and she is joined by Susan Pietrykowski, a retired Air Force Medical Service Corps officer and Brigadier General. She's also joined by retired Command Master Chief Petty Officer Tyrone Willis, a senior Navy Medicine Enlisted leader, and Major Tiara Walz, a healthcare administrator and assistant professor in the Army Baylor MHA MBA program, and Second Lieutenant Ryan Leone, a fourth-year Army medical student at Columbia University. The panel discusses personal experiences, actionable insights, and the importance of sponsorship and mentorship in overcoming feelings of inadequacy. The Bring Your Own Chair concept is introduced as a framework for finding one's place at the table, engaging confidently, and advocating for others. The discussion also addresses the challenges of leaving a table gracefully and the importance of self-awareness in professional growth. For further information about this episode and our previous guests, visit our website at wardocspodcast.com. Be sure to follow WarDocs on your preferred podcast platform and subscribe to our WarDocs YouTube channel.
Welcome to WarDocs, the military medicine podcast. This show brings you a first-hand, behind-the-scenes look into the mission, unique opportunities, and deployed experiences of the entire military healthcare team. From state-of-the-art hospitals in the United States to the most austere environments across the globe, WarDocs has you covered.
All right, so my name is Lindsey Umlauf, and I'm going to be your moderator for this excellent panel we've put together for tonight's session. We'll be covering a topic near and dear to my heart and something that's pervasive across multiple industries, but with the unique intersection in healthcare and military service. We'll be discussing imposter syndrome, sharing personal stories and actionable insights to help you and others flip the script on imposter syndrome and potentially even seeing it as a source of strength and growth. So for you joining us tonight, I'm going to make two assumptions about you. You're spending your personal time either watching this live stream or listening to this panel session via the WarDocs podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go out on a limb and make a couple assumptions about you. One, you have a growth mindset. You're interested in pushing your edge both personally and professionally, not because of your own ego or accolades, but because you care deeply about our mission in healthcare and in military medicine. My second assumption is that you care about the development of your colleagues, your team, your subordinates, and your peers. And I challenge you to take away some nuggets from our session today and share them with your team, because military medicine is stronger together. So on our next slide, we have our mandatory disclaimer. Our views are our own and do not reflect the Department of Defense, Department of Army, Navy, Air Force, or the U.S. government. Our learning objectives. Today, we're going to be discussing imposter syndrome prevalence, causes and impact within healthcare, and the implications to military medicine. We'll also describe actionable tools to identify and overcome symptoms of imposter syndrome. So we'll do a quick overview, including some mitigating strategies, and then we'll introduce you all to the Bring Your Own Chair concept, moving through each step in a panel discussion format. We have a lot to get through within the hour, so let's buckle up and go. So when I say the phrase imposter syndrome, likely some feelings, experiences, or a visual comes to mind. So take a moment and reflect on what those words mean to you. And if you're on Riverside, you can drop your thoughts into the chat. So in short, imposter syndrome is when you attribute your successes to external instead of internal factors. You'll commonly hear phrases like, I just got lucky, or I was in the right place at the right time, or my personal favorite is, I've tricked them. All of these statements really diminish your personal experience and value that you bring to the team, circumstance, or the organization. Although this was first studied amongst professional women, it's well established that imposter syndrome is pervasive and it transcends gender, racial groups, and industry. But the good news here is that those who tend to struggle with imposter syndrome are high achievers. So congrats. I'm sure we're all high achievers with type A tendencies dialing in on a Wednesday night, right? So military medicine itself is not immune to imposter syndrome. In 2024, a sample of first-year medical students at USU were queried on their experiences with imposter syndrome. And the study found that of those surveyed, 75% reported frequent or intense feelings of imposterism. And because of its association with burnout, self-doubt, anxiety, imposter syndrome is especially relevant in an education setting because it can inhibit student engagement and growth in the learning environment. Additionally, those with imposter syndrome may struggle more with situations of ambiguity or complexity due to lower confidence in problem solving. But thankfully for us in medicine, we never have to operate in those types of circumstances, right? Like never dealing with complex, ambiguous no, that's wrong. So it's especially prevalent in our setting with unique considerations for the military sector due to our rank structure. It just adds an additional layer of complexity. Those with imposter syndrome are also less likely to have an actionable vision for their future career path due to feelings of inadequacy. And this may limit their self selection into broadening assignments, leadership opportunities, or taking on new and challenging projects. So, what can we do about it? Well, at the individual level, you're off to a great start by attending this session and listening to the podcast episode. Realize that you're not alone in your feelings of imposter syndrome. Talking to a friend or mentor will likely uncover similar experiences they have had struggles with these feelings. I also recommend engaging in reflective journaling. This can help protect against negativity bias or recall bias towards the negative experiences. Unless we deliberately write down our thoughts and feelings almost on a daily basis, we may overlook our successes and you might look back on your journal entries and you'll reap multiple benefits if you do that. You'll likely feel more grounded and have a more solid sense of self. And you also may look back and realize that the struggles that you faced in the moment turned out to be not that big of a deal. And you'll also be able to better remember your successes and growth. This can help to balance your perspective, incorporating both positive and negative experiences. At the organizational level, leaders can seek to better understand related metrics associated with the impacts of imposter syndrome. Looking at the attrition and promotion rates, both of their civilian and military staff within the organization or their formations may uncover trends that may focus your mitigating strategies, both from the mentorship and sponsorship perspectives. Additionally, when advertising for positions, including objective metrics and descriptors on what you're looking for is important. The use of vague descriptors like visionary and dynamic leader or strong communicator may increase the likelihood of someone with imposter syndrome to self-select out of the opportunity. And what do we know about those with imposter syndrome? They tend to be our high performers. So those are the exact folks we want raising their hand for those opportunities. The use of KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities within the military is definitely a step in the right direction in making job qualifications and experience requirements more objective. So now we'll take a few minutes for our esteemed panel members to introduce themselves and for them also to share what we will call their imposter syndrome origin story, sharing an experience or time when they felt those feelings. We're going to be very transparent this evening, sharing our own personal stories with the hopes that you, our audience, will do the same with your team and organizations. So I'll go ahead and kick us off. My name is Major Lindsey Umlauf, and I'm an Army physical therapist. My first instance of really discovering and working through imposter syndrome was very distinct for me. And I recall exactly where I was when I began to develop this framework of this bring your own chair concept that we'll be discussing today. It was when I was crossing what felt like a chasm between being a direct care clinical provider as a physical therapist and trying to expand into other spaces out of that direct provider role. I knew that I had valuable insights to offer in the broader leadership space, but I wasn't sure how to get into the room and let alone a seat at the table. It took years of me working on my own skill set, my emotional intelligence, and letting go of my ego before I felt comfortable and even sought out areas of growth where I felt like I was completely pushing my edge. And that's where a lot of magical growth happened. I'm excited to share with you about all of that throughout this session this evening. I'll now pass the mic over to the amazing Pi. Please introduce yourself to our audience and share your imposter syndrome origin story.
Thank you, Lindsey. Very happy to be here. I am Susan Pietrykowski, or Pi, which I was named in the Air Force. I was a Medical Service Corps officer for 28 years in our great Air Force, and now in the Chief Operating Officer for HealthNet Federal Services. So Lindsey gave a great example of mid-career level imposter syndrome, and I'm here to tell you that even senior leaders experience imposter syndrome. So as I was finishing up as the commander of an outpatient clinic at Ellsworth Air Force Base, I was given the opportunity to command a large inpatient facility at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. And although I had served in inpatient facilities before, at Lake and Heath and Andrews, the charge to lead an inpatient facility was a bit daunting, and I had sort of this looming feeling of, hey, am I equipped for this job? Um, I'd never worked in the inpatient setting before, being an MSc, not a provider. So really kind of had that imposter syndrome looming above me. And so at our first staff meeting in the new job, I dove right in. And a couple of minutes into the meeting, our chief nurse sort of interjected and said, hey, ma'am, would you like me to provide the bed status report? And I said, well, of course I want you to provide the bed status report. It was sort of a, okay, I'm going to fake it till I make it moment. And what I discovered was that I really was prepared, because although I wasn't the expert at all things associated with running an inpatient facility, I relied and leveraged my team in the areas where I wasn't an expert. So relied a lot on our chief doc and our chief nurse. And it was really a great reminder of the power of a team and looking for those cultural adds. And we got to do some great things there together at Langley, like implement trusted care. And I know General Murphy's on, and that's the Air Force's version of high reliability. And it was really awesome. So all that to say, imposter syndrome can impact senior leaders too. So I think we're going to Ryan next. So over to Ryan.
Hey everyone, it's an honor to be here. My name is Ryan. I'm a fourth year medical student at Columbia and an Army reservist with the HPSB scholarship program. I would say for imposter syndrome, I'm experiencing it right now as you have me following a retired general. So that's a great and timely example to offer, but I've definitely experienced that in my life since going to college and seeing people around me that were way smarter, way more qualified and had a ton to offer, and really trying to figure out what it is that I can bring to the table myself. So looking forward to the rest of this conversation, and I'll turn it over to our next panelist.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tyrone Willis, and I happen to be a retired Command Master Chief after 32 years of wonderful service of the Navy. And currently, I'm a recruiting specialist for the Uniformed Service University, as I like to call the us university, because we are definitely involved with everyone. And also, I'm an outreach coordinator for our school with STEM and outreach to students. As a retired Command Master Chief, my first time probably witnessing or feeling imposter syndrome, I say several times. I think starting off, and as General Pye stated, that it don't have to be upper level, senior level. It can be your introductory level as well. Being with the Marine Corps, being a hospital corpsman in my earlier years, being with the Marines. And all of a sudden you with these physically fit world conquerors as they felt they are. And here you are, you in medicine, and everything is looked upon you. You have to have all the answers. If someone go down, you have to know the right questions, the right answers. And it could be overwhelming. And it's just like, am I really qualified to be here? I mean, I have the knowledge, but do I have the aptitude to take it even further? Because as a hospital corpsman or a medic in the Army, you have to talk to senior leaders. And sometimes you may be the only medical specialist there. I mean, not a doctor, not a specialist, but enlisted. And you have to give this advice to senior people. So it's just like, it can be overwhelming. So you have to have that confidence, like, I've been prepared. I've done enough setting reps in this field to take care of anything. But now I have to take care of stuff beyond me, because I have to be that speaker or that talker. And if you're not confident in talking and speaking, you're like, oh, this could be overwhelming. You're the only enlisted in there. You got all these senior officers and mid-grade officers, and you're just like, take a deep breath. And it's like, okay, and rely on those skill sets that you developed throughout the years to say, okay, I'm prepared for this, and I think I'm ready. And as General Pye said, you fake it like you make it. No one knows that you don't know what you know unless you tell them you don't know. So you have to be confident in yourself. And we will discuss a little bit more about that, but I'm just happy to be here and thankful for those that's joining us tonight. Now I turn it over to the next panelist.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. I am Major Promotable Tiara Walz, and I am just about over 16 years in the Army. I'm a healthcare administrator and a medical service corps officer, and I'm really excited to be joining you all tonight. I make a joke that my imposter syndrome started when I was in the womb, because society was just waiting to put all this pressure on me, and I have played very well into it. And I think the prevalence of imposter syndrome is probably more than any of us even know, because there is a stigma associated with admitting that you might not know everything. And I think that's pretty common in the military. I would say that my imposter syndrome story started, or really, when I commissioned into the Army, and I found myself, it was towards the end of the Iraq War, and I was stationed in 1st Cavalry Division for my first unit. And there's nothing quite like putting a second lieutenant who has no clue how the Army really works in front of a platoon of very seasoned and frequently deployed competent soldiers. So that was really my first exposure to, I'm either going to seem really motivated or fake it till I make it, or figure out a way to win some hearts and minds and leverage expertise in a way that we can be successful. And I think that we'll talk a lot more about how playing to your strengths and utilizing rookie smarts can really help you as a leader. You don't have to know everything. And sometimes that's a great thing to bring to the table, to offer value to that organization and maybe disrupt the status quo and help them improve, and in many ways. And then the other time is really just not that long ago when the Army funded me to go get my doctorate in public health. And I now teach down at the Army Baylor program in San Antonio at Fort Sam Houston. And getting a PhD is a special kind of struggle, trials and tribulations for sure. And I know many on the call can relate to their various experiences throughout their life. And hopefully we can provide some sound advice and wisdom and guidance for you to use along your journey tonight. Thank you.
Awesome. So what I've learned is that we're never going to get over these feelings of imposter syndrome, but maybe we'll begin to associate them with more of a growth mindset and growing in our experiences. Because if General Pie still experiences it, I think we're in for a lot of trouble here. So again, I'm so excited to facilitate this discussion. Moving back to the Bring Your Own Chair framework that we're going to be going through here shortly. I was at a Global Health Strategies for Security course hosted by USU over at the Henry Jackson Foundation. Again, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and really pushing my edge there, totally out of my skill set. I was seeking various broadening assignments and opportunities for growth. And that's when this idea of this metaphorical table came to mind. And the framework that we'll be introducing is purposely very simple and logical, because I want it to be something that you can easily recall and reflect on with your own personal and professional life. At any point in time, we are metaphorically sitting at multiple tables. We may be at the head of some of the tables. We may be barely squeezing in at the very edge of the table at others. We may even be backseating at those tables, just trying to get into the room. Wherever you're at, there are some key steps and takeaways for you to both continue your own professional and personal growth, but also methods for you to help bring along those to your left and right so they can also continue with their development. So for our first step, find a table. You first need to find a table. This implies that you're actively engaged in your field and that you're curious, that you're seeking to support the mission, whatever that may be, depending on your assignment or your career passions. This also implies that you've engaged in some personal reflection, that you're aware of your interests, your passions, your strengths, and your weaknesses. So this photo, if you're joining us on the live stream, I'll describe it for the podcast. It's an AI-generated photo with the prompt, provide a crowded cafeteria scene meant to invoke anxiety. So it's like this dark, dramatic picture of this person alone in a cafeteria room looking for a table. We have all been there. Like there's this common core memory throughout humanity of just trying to find that welcoming table to sit at. So Ryan, to kick us off with step one, for those struggling to find a table, what advice would you offer to help them get started?
Yeah, great question, ma'am. So I would say the first thing, going with this cafeteria analogy, is to survey the cafeteria and be curious about what it offers, right? So look for themes, groups, and individuals. On the themes front, I would say look for what kinds of topics are people talking about, engaging in, which ones have a lot of activity. Maybe they're in the news a lot. There's new publications about them, or they're talked about in the speeches of people who are big names in that space. Look for groups. Are there professional organizations that represent these different tables and whatnot? Are there personal ones? Are there official ones versus unofficial ones? And then look for particular individuals. Who's the ringleader at each of these tables? Who are the people that in their bios talk about really interesting things that you might like, whether that's mentorship or operational work or clinical work or any kind of field or subfield that seems interesting to you. And look at that both for young and old people, right? Who are the people that are established and doing a lot, but also who are the people that are rising stars? Outside of the survey in the cafeteria, I'd say stop by a few tables, kind of do some engagement, see if anything really strikes your interest and makes you kind of passionate. Maybe that's attending a virtual panel, as you may be doing yourself right now, or listening to some podcasts like the WarDocs podcast. And then just pick one at the end. I think a lot of people get nervous about trying to find, what table to go to or what area to get interested in because they think that they're committing the rest of their lives to it. But just don't be afraid to remember that you can always pivot. You can try something out, and if it doesn't work, you can find a different area later on. But getting past that hesitation to just give it a shot, I think is a big first step. And I think the next speakers will add a lot more color and detail to some of those next steps that come.
Anybody else from the panel want to jump in on Ryan's thought?
I like the idea that Ryan state that engage survey, because sometimes it's just look around, and sometimes you might see a welcoming face or a smiling face, and that may gravitate you toward them. And at least you'll see that whether they're ally or not, that's a possibility because they greet you just by a smile or even looked in your direction. And there's always, to me, throughout my career, it's always been someone willing to help or willing to assist you when you seem lost.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, so now we've surveyed the cafeteria, we found some areas of interest, and now we might be awkwardly standing next to this metaphorical table, perhaps not quite sure how to open up the dialogue and introduce ourselves. And as we've discussed, it's really important before you engage in this step to really understand the value proposition at that table. What can you bring? What perspective do you have that may be of value? So, Willis, once someone's found a table or an opportunity to pursue, what's the best way to engage and make a meaningful contribution to the table?
And thanks for that question, Liz. I think one of the first thing is I like to say the 3 C's. I like to use 3 C's when engaging a table: confidence, composure, and being courageous. And when I say confident, know that okay, you're at the table. Now, before you got to the table, you had to enter the room. And just use that room as the opportunity that, hey, I'm in the room. And while I was in the room, I got a lot of experience, whether I was at the table or not. So from the experience I have, whether it's mentorship or sponsorship, I'm there in the room. And I have to have that confidence in my sets and rep that I'm properly prepared to be at the table. So that's the confidence you have. I like to say, when you're going in being confident, I know we all feel like, okay, am I really here now? I'm right here in the room. What is expected of me? And it's not that you have to be overwhelmingly confident, but just have confidence in yourself that you're merit to be there, meaning because of what you've done, the sets and rep, your experience, that it's just not happenstance that you're there, that you have to be confident and trust your skill set. You don't have to be, arrogant, but assured. You don't have to be braggadocious, but believable. You don't have to be cocky, but confident. And that's the confident, trusting your skill sets, trusting the people that believe in you, because you didn't get there alone. Someone assisted you or helped you get to the table. Now you're at the table. Engage confidently. And when I say being composure, stay calm. Just stay calm about all the different things that you bring in. And you may bring a calmness to the table where you're at, because you may have several different layers of leadership of different experiences. And you may be that common factor they see, whether you're young or old or seasoned like me with the highlights. You bring a sense of calmness to that board or that table, because it may have been chaotic. And that's one of the reasons they say, hey, it's something about Ryan that I like. He brings a calmness and a confidence that's like, whoa, okay, I can appreciate that. The other thing I would like to say, being courageous, be fearless, okay? Regardless of what it is, whether you feel like I really shouldn't be here. I've been in a lot of different places. What I'm bringing is my confidence and my courageous, because hey, I believe in what we're doing. I'm committed to it. By being committed, that's like, okay, now I'm courageous. Now, if I'm committed to it, I'm doing whatever it would take to make us successful. And if that means being a backseat rider, which is okay, because everybody don't need to be a driver, but everybody need to be part of the team. Ultimately, what you bring, your uniqueness. All your different experiences, whatever life you come from your different experience, whether it's in the military or civilian sector, your work ethic. All these things make you unique to this table. And think about this. At this table, we all at the same table. No one's more important than the next. We all just have different responsibility. And I'm bringing a different uniqueness to this table, whether it's confidence, whether it's being have composure, or being fearless, courageous about anything that's before me. So, and it's easy to have that imposter syndrome, regardless of whether you're a private or a general. You have that, but you have to believe in your skill sets. I mean that your experiences, to rely on those experiences to help engage the table and be confident at the table.
Awesome. Well, I actually have my fearless Taylor Swift friendship bracelet on right now. So when you were saying, I was just like, fearless. So I hope there's other Swifties listening to this. So yeah. Okay, awesome. So now that we've engaged the table and perhaps gotten to know a couple of people there, we've reached a turning point. We now need to assess, does this table align with your personal and professional goals? If so, you may choose to set down your chair. Now, setting down your chair is that first objective statement that you are taking up space at this table, which also implies taking ownership of your seat. Any seat that you are in is a seat that someone else may not have the opportunity to fill. So you better bring it. The title of this discussion is not wait for someone to offer you a chair. It's more active than that. It's you taking ownership of your career, your goals, and your future. Now, before we jump into our next question, we're going to do a fun lightning round for what type of chair are you sitting down? So I'll go first. So usually my answer to this is a swivel chair, but I am PCSing tomorrow, so I currently have an empty house. So right now I will take whatever chair is available to me. And right now Doug Sutterdahl has me in a folding chair, which is lovely in his WarDocs studio. So I'm very thankful for this chair right now because otherwise I wouldn't even have one. So Pi, over to you. What kind of chair are you sitting down?
So being in this area, Lindsey, I love Amish furniture, so well made. And so I'm gonna take a good Amish well-made chair and set it down. And then I'm gonna employ Willis's 3Cs. I love them.
You're just so
Especially
classy.
that courageous one.
You are so classy, Pi. Ryan, what about you? What kind of chair are you gonna sit down?
I'd say a rocking chair. I'm going for comfort here.
Nice. Willis?
I was going to say rocking chair, but since Ryan said it, give me a firm wooden chair. Reason being, I want to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So I always have to be at the ready.
Love it. Tiara?
These answers. So my chair will be bold and bright, just like the fresh ideas I'm going to bring to the table, right? And it might appear really flashy to maybe overcompensate for any impostery kind of feelings that I have. And it's not going to have arms because I want to express that I'm open and willing to collaborate and participate. So I've clearly had a lot of time to think about this. And each time I answer this, I'm like, yeah, it's going to be this. It's going to be bright green because that's my favorite color.
I love it. A chartreuse chair, if you will.
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, so back to our sitting down the chair topic. We get a little off topic here, but it's fun. So taking ownership of your seat can be super intimidating. So Tiara, how do you approach getting comfortable being uncomfortable in your large, green, comfortable chair?
Yes. So the chair helps, right? Like if you really like what you're bringing to the table, I think it helps you to get a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I love that Willis talked about the 3Cs because we actually know that it's easier for us to remember information when it comes in sets of threes. And so I also have sort of like 3 main bullet points that I use to think about how we set down our chair, right? How do you get comfortable with being uncomfortable? The first step is really to just embrace it and accept that it's a fact of life. I mentioned before that we're not very open with feelings of imposter syndrome, but honestly, most of us feel it, right? And if you are not thinking that you have it, there might be something wrong, or perhaps you're not in a difficult enough room and maybe you're a little too comfortable with your life and maybe you should push the envelope a little bit, right? So I think about embracing the discomfort. We know that growth comes from being uncomfortable, and that's thinking about when we're uncomfortable, it makes us push a little bit harder to deliver a better product. And so we're actually getting more quality work out of people who feel like they have to work a little harder, really do their research. We had We just had oral boards examinations at the MHA MBA program where I teach. And oftentimes, the younger and less experienced students will really surprise themselves because they will crush their oral examinations. And a lot of times I tell them that I think the more inexperienced people are actually doing more to prepare because they're more worried about performing well. And so that's one great example of that. The second thing would be to really redefine what success looks like to you, because I think that societal pressures might make us feel like we're supposed to be the smartest person in the room all the time. But if you've just entered a table or just set down your chair, you're not supposed to be the smartest. You're supposed to be challenging yourself to grow and develop and contribute to that table with the skill set that you have, right? So maybe success that day or that year, this is where your journaling and your long-term planning comes in. Maybe success looks like being able to lead a discussion that week, or maybe it's giving a solid brief to your commander on the courses of action he asked you to brief him on, or maybe it's publishing a medical paper, a medical research paper in a manuscript. Maybe that's the goal. And so I think we need to redefine success sometimes to make it a little more bite-sized, instead of comparing ourselves to the top people all the time and wondering why we're not measuring up, right? Because that's kind of an impossible standard. I talk about an inner critic that I have, and her name is Agatha, and I think that we can really learn a lot by challenging the negative thoughts we have and consider that they might not be our own thoughts. And there are a lot of prominent celebrities and researchers out there who have named their inner critic or named an alter ego to kind of compartmentalize those feelings and recognize that they're not necessarily yours. So that can be helpful to kind of get that perspective, and that comes with self-awareness and things like that, right? And the third thing is really just to do the things to develop that growth mindset. I think we can really get stuck in a rut at times thinking we're not going to be able to learn, or I'm not going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to succeed at this job. But take it one day at a time, rely on the people around you. That's what they're there for. And just admit when you need to learn. And that's just going to make you that much better. So I think those are all really good things to help you sort of take ownership of that seat that you have found to be so comfy.
Yeah, I love how you've reframed that discomfort and finding that it's because you're pushing your edge and because you're growing. And if you're not uncomfortable, like if a week goes by at work and I'm like, that was pretty easy. I'm like, oh, like what am I not doing? Or what could I be doing? Because clearly I'm too comfortable. Maybe that's just a masochistic part, but I think that that's an important point. So thanks for bringing that up. So once we've sat down our chair and we've worked with that team at the table for some time, you may uncover gaps in either experience or knowledge at the table. Maybe there's an end user or a stakeholder not at the table, and y'all are making decisions that might impact that person. And you might feel that their voice could add value and strengthen the work of the team. So, Pi, why is it important to advocate for and sponsor others? And how has your experience in these roles strengthened the organizations you've served in throughout your career?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I think it's first important to delineate between mentorship and sponsorship. So, a mentor advises you and a sponsor advocates for you. Or, just to put it simply, a mentor talks with you, a sponsor talks about you when you're not in the room. Now, someone can serve as both a mentor and a sponsor, but a sponsor is typically someone who has a seat at the table and is willing to use his or her capital on your behalf. So, the reason sponsorship is important in the context of imposter syndrome is that imposter syndrome thrives in environments where credit is hoarded and recognition is transactional. So, when we choose to advocate for others, especially those who don't see their own brilliance yet, we create a culture where success is shared. So, sponsorship is about investing in potential, maybe even before it's fully proven, and that requires generosity over ego. So I'm going to provide an example back from my Langley days again. We were preparing for a visit from the Air Force Surgeon General to our MTF. And for those of you who have been stationed in a military treatment facility. A visit from your service Surgeon General is a big deal. And it was General Edgar at the time, just a wonderful human being. And as the medical group commander, I wanted to pick just the right project officer to make this visit a success. And, the usual suspects of folks who typically volunteered for this type of event all raised their hands. Everybody wanted to do it. When one of my squadron commanders put forward one of our docs, a young major, to lead this visit. We're going to call him Dr. John Smith. And that's funny because that's actually his name. Uh, I got his permission to use his name. Anyway, I admit I was skeptical because I didn't know, Doc Smith very well at the time. I knew he had a good reputation. And I thought, hey, this type of event would typically be outside the comfort zone of an doc. And so I want to highlight here an important component of sponsorship is speak up in rooms the person isn't in. So this squadron commander saw something in Doc Smith and spoke up and said, hey, I know we've got a lot of volunteers, but let's give someone else an opportunity. So the squadron commander was a strong advocate, said he would do a great job. So I went ahead and gave him the opportunity, along with a little bit of oversight on the visit. So another important component of sponsorship is don't just open the door, walk through it with them, be invested in their success. So Doc Smith hadn't led this kind of visit before, but, I had experience and was able to provide some guidance and pointers to him along the way. He really didn't need a lot, but I was able to give him some guidance. So Doc Smith did a phenomenal job on this visit and actually came up with features that I wouldn't have even thought of. So, for example, General Edgar had previously been a flight doc early in his career in one of our fighter squadrons at Langley. So Doc Smith incorporated a visit to that squadron at the 1st Fighter Wing and arranged for him to get new patches from this squadron, which he had been a part of 20 plus years before. And the SG was absolutely giddy about it. It was just awesome. So I want to highlight another feature of sponsorship, and that it's not just altruism, it's creating a legacy. So sponsoring others is a leadership act, and it reflects values and creates a ripple effect that lasts long after, you leave the room. So in this example, although we gave Doc Smith the opportunity to host the SG visit, he ran with it and thrived, and it served as a launching pad for bigger things for him. He eventually became a White House physician. Squadron commander, went to in-residence PME, and I know that he's on the Air Force staff right now. He is paying that opportunity forward to others and creating his own legacy of sponsorship. And in fact, I've sent a couple of physicians his way that needed a little mentorship and sponsorship, and he happily said that he would do that. So I think sponsorship is very important. Again, speak up in rooms that people aren't in. Don't just open the door, walk through it with them. And sponsoring others creates a ripple effect and creates a legacy after you leave the room.
I love that story. Yeah, no, that's such a great story because you can really see the symmetry where someone went on a limb with Major Smith and kind of put him out there in a front-facing role that he wouldn't have had the opportunity to otherwise. And now, here he is on Air Force staff, bringing up those behind him. So that's a really great story. So thank you so much for sharing that. And that kind of goes into our next step, this invite to build a larger table. So one misconception that I think impacts professional growth that might be more emphasized in the military due to the nature of our career progression and evaluation structure is that we tend to view successes as a zero-sum game, that your success may preclude my success because we're always in this competition with literally everyone. And this type of thinking does nobody any good, and it will likely have negative impacts on mission success. When we leave our ego at the door and we focus on the problem at hand, we can accomplish so much more. So building a larger table to our metaphorical table may be as easy as just setting out the leaves of the table, of that Amish table that I know Pi has to match her Amish chair, of course, and just expanding the seats that way. Or if you're familiar working within the government, things might be slightly more complicated when it comes to expanding scope or scale. And you might be moving from, just that easy sliding out of the leaves. And then all of a sudden, maybe instead this table is from IKEA and the instructions are in Swedish and you have no idea what's going on. So Ryan, In healthcare and in the military, building a strong bench of talent is critical to sustainability and success of the mission and organization. From your experience as a fourth-year medical student, how do we approach identifying and nurturing talented individuals who may be struggling with feelings of imposter syndrome or self-doubt?
Yeah, so I think I can speak to this question a little bit both from the receiving end of someone who's been fortunate to have a lot of great sponsors and coaches and mentors, and the things that I, picked up along the way that helped me to help grow that table with that relationship. And also from the mentor end of, what I found to be valuable from those trying to pass things along and grow that table. So, from the, and I guess this is also because I'm sort of at this cusp of transition where I've been receiving a lot of it, but also now in a position as I'm getting older and closer to being a doctor to be able to give some of that to younger students and pre-meds and whatnot myself. So from the perspective of like for someone who is being invited to the table and wants to help grow it for others, I think engaging periodically but consistently is really important with those people who are leaders and sponsors and coaches for you. Being grateful for the opportunity and showing that you're really happy and excited to be there, recognizing that other people might be busy, and that you're thankful for their time. I would say as you're trying to get help, because it is hard to be that newbie at any table. Target your asks to those who can best help, and make sure that it isn't a heavy lift for them or that it's something very particular to what they have to offer. Also, do the work well when you're given an opportunity. Prove that you can make the most of it, not only to show for yourself that you're helping out the team, but also to sort of open that door for other people to say, wow, med students can actually make a difference in our program, or XYZ individual can actually be a meaningful player when it comes to getting the work done that we want to accomplish. On the same vein, don't hog time or opportunities. If you have something that, is put in front of you, but you don't think that you have the time for it, or maybe you do, but you want to see someone else who just kind of joined along, get that, I think it works well for everybody if you offer that up to someone else or recommend someone that you think could benefit from it. And finally, on the same vein, pay it forward. If you've been thankful as I have to receive a lot of mentorship, try to give that on to people below you. Then speaking from that mentor, sponsor, and coach perspective, what can they do to sort of inspire those below them to help, again, grow that table or strengthen that table, however you want to refer to the metaphor. I think doing just that and making them want to mentor others, either explicitly or implicitly, making it clear that, this is something that I'm offering to you because I hope that one day you'll do the same for people below you. I think that can really empower people to want to help and make that a part of their mission going forward. In the same vein, treat others how you want to be treated. If you can think back, even if it's been years to when you were a recipient of that kind of mentorship and guidance and that first invite to take part in something, try to recognize that and harness it to offer that to other people. I would say also, not being too busy to offer mentorship or sponsorship is important. I remember the first time that I reached out to a senior hospital leader, I kind of emailed them out of the blue, and they responded, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And they took the time to sit down with me, talk to me about opportunities, give me recommendations. And it not only was helpful at an individual level, but it also, I think, empowered me to feel that level of confidence to say that, I can reach out to people and there are people willing to help someone, even, 30 years their junior or, many, many levels of leadership below them. Also, I'd say if you have constructive feedback as a leader, to give it to people. When you hear from a student too, I would say, take it one step further and, offer them a time to chat with you, right? So I've, reached out to people and just said, hey, just, wanted to give you an update on what's going on with me. Would love to hear what's going on with you. And some people just, it's great to hear back in general when they say, oh yeah, thanks for the update. I'm doing this. Good luck. But the people who I think I've remembered the most are the ones that say, thanks for keeping me in mind. Let's talk. Let's have an idea, like get an update of what you're doing, what you want to do, where you're going. And I think that really helps to build that for everybody, that table, and give them, the strong relationship to help others. And then finally, I think, this goes back to that sponsorship, promoting people when they're not in the room, offering up opportunities for them, trying to keep them in the back of your mind whenever something comes up that you think relates to a person that you've mentored in the past or sponsored in the past. If it's something that they could do or that they'd be able to fill in, or maybe it's just beyond what they've done before, but it's a great growth opportunity, don't be afraid to toss their name out there when the opportunity presents it.
Absolutely. And Ryan, although you're a fourth year medical student, you've already are having such an impact on the HPSP scholars process and with paying it forward to them. So it's really apparent with your work with the WarDocs ambassador. So I'm just so excited for you to continue to be a part of military medicine. So thanks again for being here. So as we discussed earlier, each table you sit at comes at an opportunity cost. What are you not doing because of the time and energy that you're investing in that particular table? Now, we've discussed, finding tables, sitting at tables, multiple tables all at once, and that might lead you to believe that this is like a just an upward trajectory, but that's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable to just sit at more and more tables, and in fact, it might actually impede your own growth and the growth of others. So, Tiara, how can you decide when it's time to leave a table or perhaps move on and create a new one?
Thanks for the question, Lindsay. I think that there are a few different cues that you could kind of, going back to that self-awareness, that reflection time that you're taking as a leader, there are some cues that you can sort of listen to or think about in the job that you're in, right? And some of those can be, if you feel like your growth has plateaued. So if you feel like it might be time to move on because you're not quite, maybe you've helped a lot of other people come to the table and it's starting to get crowded around the table, and you're thinking that maybe it might be time for you to open up your chair or open up that space for someone else to come in. Maybe the legacy that you're going to leave there is kind of reaching its end point and it feels right. You're seeking a new challenge, perhaps. When another way or reason could be when your voice may no longer feel heard. And that can be a good time. Like maybe you don't feel like your expertise is necessarily matching the role that you're in anymore. Perhaps sharing the insights doesn't quite feel as engaging as it once did, and your eye is starting to wander a little bit, right? It could also be when your values may no longer align with the organization or that table that you're at. If you're feeling like maybe your skill set or just the overall goals that you have in mind are no longer being served, that would be another reason. Energy is also important, right? So if you're feeling exhausted or burned out, that could be a reason to look elsewhere. Maybe, as we alluded to, you might need to take a step back and take a little breather. That could be a reason. If you're staying for the wrong reasons, you might be staying because you want to stay loyal to that table or loyal to that organization, but it might start to not feel right for you. So it's really important to figure out, because we can get so busy and inundated with day-to-day life, to think about the reasons why you're there and what are your goals? What are the organization's goals? Are you hindering the mission? Are you helping it? Or, is there room for you to kind of reach your potential and be able to give back more to the profession, or whatever metaphor, if you were to move to a different table? And one thing I like to challenge myself with, especially more now that I'm older and I have so many things going on, sometimes we have to prioritize our priorities, right? Like going back to that rule of 3, like we can only focus and give our full energy and effort to so many things at one time. And so if you need to take out a journal or a piece of paper and jot down all of the things you're trying to dedicate 100% to, it's a really good exercise, right? Because you're going to quickly realize that that's not actually humanly possible. So if you're not able to dedicate the energy that you want equitably to all the causes you're passionate about, you might need to take a step back and think about a table that you could leave, train someone to replace you, mentor them, start sponsoring people and thinking about who could come in and where you might want to go from there. And so I think that key thought is this table nourishing me, or is it just keeping me busy? And really being able to discern that requires some self-awareness and growth mindset, and really just being aware of your plan, which comes from speaking to mentors and that self-awareness, and just really thinking about where you want to go if you leave.
Absolutely. It's about, leaving that legacy behind you that Pi was talking about earlier. So up until this point, you all listening should feel super empowered and motivated. Maybe you're ready to get after it and run through that brick wall that's been holding you back. And that's amazing. And I'm glad that you're feeling that way. But we do need to address the elephant in the room. As I briefly mentioned earlier, growth and development isn't a straight line. It has its ups and downs, and those ups can be absolutely exhilarating, and those downs can be completely crushing. So I actually added this step as a consideration to the framework within the past couple of years due to a personal experience that I had. And I really, at that time, had no mental schema for being asked to leave a table, and it absolutely wrecked me. But as I was navigating that experience, thankfully with amazing friends and mentors, I found that that many of the people I talked to had experienced that same thing, but nobody seemed to talk about it until I opened up with my own experience. And I was actually encouraged to never even bring it up. But I think that it's an important balance between sharing those experiences with others so that they don't feel alone during that difficult time. So I'm going to open it up to the entire panel for whoever wants to take this one. Can you share a time when you were either personally asked to leave a table or perhaps when you helped a friend or a colleague through that experience?
Lindsay, I can take a first stab at this one. And you know, midway through my career, I heard the statement, feedback is a gift. And, sometimes feedback is hard because we all have some egos, but, feedback, whether it's positive, whether it's something you can improve on, it's always a gift. So I think if you're asked to leave a table, after you get over the ego thing, um, take it as a gift. And, what Tiara was talking about, maybe you weren't bringing the right energy, or maybe they're looking to go in a different direction. So use that gift as an opportunity. Maybe you can sponsor someone and say, okay, I understand that it's time for me to leave, but I'd like to recommend so and so to take my place at this table for the following reasons. And then you can think about, what do I want to do next? Is it time to recharge my batteries? Is it time for me to look for another table to join? So I will say, in my last job in the Air Force, I had the opportunity, just based on my position, to be the Air Force Fisher House board chair. And many of you have heard about Fisher Houses. It's a home where family members can stay while their service member is getting care at a military treatment facility. So they're on a lot of the bases around the world. And I loved this job. And it was one of, the joys of, my position. And about midway through that, there was a move to really move that panel chair position to an organization outside of the SG organization. And at first I thought, oof, absolutely not. I don't want to give this up. This is really bringing me a lot of joy. So, but what I figured out is they wanted to move it to the A1 organization. And it made a lot of sense because the one organization who handles personnel and manpower could actually provide the resources, the structure, the uniformity to the program, and they had the resources to do that. And so it was actually a great move. I had to get out of my own way when I was thinking about, giving that position up. But as I thought about it, it actually made a lot of sense. And then I partnered with the A1 to figure out the best person to take that on, to prepare them, to give them the history. And it turned out to be, and I actually stayed on the board as the SG representative. So just kind of moved into a different role. And it turned out to be a very positive experience. But, getting over that initial shock and awe of having to give that up, a position that I really enjoyed was tough. But at the end of the day, it was actually a great move.
I'd like to just add to that. And I like what General Pye stated, how she felt and how she got over it. Because a lot of times we have that ego and that pride thing. It's like, oh, but I would like to say this. Every table is not for long lasting. Some tables are just for seasons. And that sometimes some tables are for trailblazers, just for you to trailblaze that someone can accomplish to get at the table. When they see you, it's like, oh, I've been inspired by General Pye. I feel like I can be at the table. And when you take that, and sometimes you just overgrow your table, the experience, and you just like, it's like Tiara said, you're settled, and it's like, okay, this is easy now. But sometimes it's just time for us to go for someone else to grow. And sometimes we get caught up in our own feeling, because if you still stand there, how can someone else grow? And so we should, as leaders, be willing to allow somebody else to grow by going. And it's okay, just like when I retired. I was okay when I retired, shocked a lot of people. It was time to go, and I was okay with it. But you have to know when it's time to go. And like Tiara said, we have multiple different tables, but tables are just for a season, not for long lasting. And we have to be okay with that. And then if we have to sponsor someone, they're saying, hey, let me explain something to you. Let me help you to make this even better. Because they've been inspired by you. But you say, hey, we still can grow better because of your experience, your uniqueness. And that's okay, even if they ask you to leave, that's okay. Because sometimes, they it's not a bad thing. Actually, it's a good thing. Because everybody always looked at negative. Oh, I was relieved from so-and-so, so-and-so. Maybe that was just best for you and the organization. Maybe they were looking out for your well-being because they were seeing something down the road that may not align, like Tiara said, with your goals or with your aspirations. So it's okay to leave the table. And even if you fall off that table, it is okay. You know why? Because that inspired you to even grow and be even better.
It's really not a failure. If someone asks you to leave, you should look at it more like a cue and think about the lessons and the tools and the tricks that you've learned from that job and how you're going to be able to apply them in the future. But also these kind of, setbacks, if I wouldn't even call it that, it's just a redirect. You get to share those lessons with all of the people that work under you or work with you, like you've grown as a leader, and now you can share those lessons and help develop those coming up behind you. Because the older we get, the more we're going to get used to it, right? But younger people, younger officers and people that we work with, when they first have that heartbreak, it's so debilitating. And it can just be like, you're going to make it through this. Wipe the tears if you have to. Take the lesson and let's move forward because you're stronger for it.
Absolutely. I love the reframe with taking a step back, setting aside your ego, and then just looking at the table and say, what's best for the mission at hand? And to Pi's point about being asked to step down, but it was so that they could move in a different direction that was better for the organization. And that's really what we're here to serve. So always, having that larger perspective in mind is so important. That's awesome. So now we're going to just kind of review the Bring Your Own Chair framework. So that concluded kind of our additional considerations after the framework. So again, we're going to find a table, engage the table, set down your chair, invite others to the table, build a larger table. But then we always do have those other considerations throughout this entire framework of when should you leave a table, and then dealing with if you are asked to leave a table, and just taking grace and knowing that. So thank you all for attending this special panel session with WarDocs, and also to our excellent panel for taking the time to support this discussion. If you have ideas for other topics you'd like to see discussed in a similar format with WarDocs, please let us know, and we'd love to engage you in the future again.
Thank you for listening to WarDocs. We sure hope you enjoyed it. WarDocs is a nonprofit organization supported by donations from listeners like you. Please follow and subscribe to our show on whatever platform you consume your podcasts, and rate and review this episode, and share the show with your contacts on social media. Find out more information about our show, our guests, and how to become a member of Team WarDocs on WarDocsPodcast.com. Thank you for your support. If you like war stories and medical drama, WarDocs has you covered. Spread the word.